Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses as we continue with Part 4, Chapter 3, The Annual Sacrifice of Christ, from the Mystical Interpretation of Christmas by Max Heindel. Chapter 3, The Annual Sacrifice of Christ. Have you ever stood by the bedside of a friend or relative who was about to pass out of this world and into the beyond? Most of us have, for where is the house that passed not been entered by Father Time? Neither is the following phase of the occurrence, to which we would particularly direct attention, uncommon. The person about to pass out very often falls into a stupor, then awakens and sees not only this world but the world into which he is about to enter. And it is very significant that then he sees people who were his friends or relatives during the earlier part of his life. Sons, daughters, a wife, anyone in fact near and dear to him, standing around the bedside and awaiting his crossing over. The mother will fondly stretch out her arms. "Why, there is John, and how big he has grown! What a splendid big boy he is!" And so she will recognize one after another of her children who have passed into the beyond. They are assembled at her bedside, waiting for her to join them. Actuated by the same feeling that possesses people here when a child is about to be born into this world, making them rejoice at the new arrival because they feel instinctively that it is a friend who is coming to them. So also the people who have gone before into the beyond gather when a friend is about to cross the borderline and join them on the other side of the veil. Thus we see that the birth into one world is death from the viewpoint of another. The child that comes to us has died to the spiritual world, and the person who passes out of our ken into the beyond and dies here is born into a new world and joins his friends there. As above, so below. The law of analogy, which is the same for microcosm and macrocosm, tells us that what befalls human beings under given conditions must also apply to the superhuman under analogous circumstances. We are now approaching the winter solstice, the darkest days of the year, the time when the light of the sun has almost faded, when our Northern Hemisphere is cold and drear. But on the longest and darkest night, the sun turns on its upward path. The Christ light is born on the earth again, and all the world rejoices. By the terms of our analogy, however, when the Christ is born on earth, he dies to heaven. As the free spirit is at the time of birth finally and firmly encased in the veil of flesh which fetters it all through life, so also the Christ spirit is fettered and hampered each time he is born into the earth. This great annual sacrifice begins when our Christmas bells are ringing, when our joyful sounds of praise and thanksgiving are ascending to heaven. Christ is imprisoned in the most literal sense of the word, from Christmas to Easter. Men may scorn the idea that there is an influx of spiritual life and light at this time of the year. Nevertheless, the fact remains whether we believe it or not. Everyone in the whole world at this time feels lighter, feels different, feels as if a load were lifted off his shoulders. The spirit of peace on earth and goodwill towards man prevails. The spirit that we also would give something expresses itself in Christmas gifts. This spirit is not to be denied, as is patent to anyone who is at all observant. And this is a reflex of the great divine wave of giving. God so loved the world that he gave his only or alone begotten Son. Christmas is the time of the giving, though it is not consummated until Easter. This is the crux, the turning point, the place where we feel that something has happened which ensures the prosperity and continuance of the world. How different is the feeling at Christmas from the one that is manifest at Easter? At the latter, there is an outgoing desire, an energy which expresses itself in sex love with desire for perpetuation of self, as the keynote. How different this is from the love which expresses itself in the spirit of giving that we find at Christmas time rather than that of receiving. And look now at the churches. Never does the candle burn so brightly as upon this, the shortest and the darkest day of the year. Never do the bells sound so festive as when they ring out their message to the waiting world: the Christ is born. God is light, says the inspired apostle. And no other description is capable of conveying so much of the nature of God as those three little words. The invisible light that is clothed in the flame upon the altar is an apt representation of God the Father. In the bells we have an apt symbol of Christ, the Word, for their metal tongues proclaim the gospel message of peace and goodwill. while the incense brings an added spiritual fervor, representing the power of the Holy Spirit. The Trinity is thus symbolically part of the celebration, which makes Christmas the most spiritually joyful time of the year, from the standpoint of the human race, which is now embodied and working in the physical world. But it must not be forgotten, as was said in the opening paragraph of this letter, that the birth of Christ upon earth is the death of Christ, to the glory of heaven. That at the time when we rejoice at his annual coming, he is invested again with the heavy physical load which we have crystallized about ourselves and which is now our dwelling place, the earth. In this heavy body he is then encrusted, and anxiously he waits for the day of final liberation. You understand, of course, there are days and nights for the greater spirits as for the human beings. That as we live in our body during the daytime, work out the destiny which we have created for ourselves in the physical world, and are then liberated at night into the higher world to recuperate, so also there is this ebb and flow of the Christ Spirit. It dwells within our earth a part of the year, and then withdraws into the higher worlds. Thus, Christmas is for Christ the commencement of a day of physical life, the beginning of a period of restriction. What then should be the aspiration of the devout and enlightened mystic who realizes the greatness of his sacrifice, the greatness of this gift which is being bestowed upon mankind by God at this time of the year, who realizes this sacrifice of the Christ for our sake, this giving himself, subjecting himself to a virtual death that we may live, this wonderful love that is being poured out upon the earth at this time. What should be his aspiration? What but to imitate in however small a measure the wonderful works of God? He should aspire to make himself more the servant of the cross than ever before, more closely to follow the Christ in everything by sacrificing himself for his brothers and sisters, by uplifting humanity within his immediate sphere of work, so as to hasten the day of liberation for which the Christ Spirit is waiting, groaning, and travailing. We mean the permanent liberation, the day, and the coming of Christ. To realize this aspiration in the fullest measure, let us go forth during the coming year with full self-reliance and faith. If we have heretofore despaired of our ability to work for Christ, then let this despair pass. For has he not said, "Greater works than these shall ye do"? Would he who has the word of truth, would he have said such things if it were not possible to realize them? All things are possible to them that love God. If we will really work in our own little sphere, not looking for the greater things until we have done the work close at hand, then we shall find that a wonderful soul growth may be attained, so that the people who are round about us will see in us something which they may not be able to define, but which will nevertheless be patent to them. They shall see that Christmas light, the light of the newborn Christ, shining within our sphere of action. It can be done. It only depends upon ourselves whether we will take him at his word so as to realize this command. Be ye therefore perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Perfection may seem a very long way off. We may realize more acutely as we look upon him how far we are from living up to our ideals. Nevertheless, it is by striving daily, hourly, that we finally attain, and every day some little progress can be made, something can be done. In some way we can let our light shine so that men shall see it as a beacon light in the darkness of the world. May God help us during the coming year to attain a greater measure of Christ-likeness than we have ever before attained. May we live such lives that when another year has rolled around and we again see the candlelights of Christmas and hear the bells that call us to the holy night service, we shall then feel that we have not lived in vain. Each time we give ourselves in service to others, we add to the luster of our soul bodies, which are built of ether. It is the Christ ether that now floats this sphere of ours, and let us remember that if we ever want to work for his liberation, we must in sufficient numbers evolve our own soul bodies to the point where they may float the earth. Thus, we may take up his burden and save him the pain of physical existence. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment, and if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.